On today's show, we start our NBA Draft Profile series focused on Illinois' combo guard, Kasparas Jakucionis. We'll take a look at his strengths, his weaknesses, NBA player comps, his fit with the Houston Rockets, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform you're choosing, and then go to YouTube and like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks, here because it's that special time of year where Madison gets to flex his NBA draft muscles, and we lean on him heavily as we navigate this pre-draft process for the Houston Rockets, taking a look at all the different prospects on kind of our internal Rockets big board, if you will. And Madison, we're starting our deep dive process here. We're going to do these individual draft profiles focused on some of the different prospects that could be on the board for the Houston Rockets at pick 10. And we're going to be starting off with the combo guard out of Illinois, Kasparas Jakucionis, who is he's been consistently mocked to the Rockets kind of across the board. It seems like there are a lot of mock drafts that have him going to Houston at 10, although kind of his draft range seems to be a little all over the place. Like I've seen some mocks that have him going as early as like 6 or 7. And then I've seen some mocks where he like completely falls out of the lottery, and it isn't even up in the top 14 to begin with, late, kind of more of like towards the later first round. So kind of a wide range of, I guess, draft options here at this point. Hit me with, we're gonna get into his strengths, his weaknesses, different player comps, how he potentially fits with the Rockets, all these different things. But hit me with kind of your elevator pitch for somebody who's never watched this kid play a day in their lives. What's the elevator pitch for Kasparas?
Yeah, man. Kasparas is a great prospect. And, for someone who had never heard of Kasparas or watched him play, I let you know that he is a shot creating combo guard that can make plays for others. And that's just the gist of who Kasparas is. I mean, he had a big role on this Illinois team with a lot of usage, and he consistently created shots from the perimeter and got downhill and scored, and also made his teammates better by making plays. Now, the efficiency wasn't the greatest, but with that, at 18 years old, 19 years old, as a freshman running a program, I thought Kasparas did a really good job and flashed a lot of upside as a shot creating guard, combo guard. And he has good size at 6'6". He just needs to work on his efficiency, but his motor runs high, and that is the type of player that I think teams are going to be interested, especially when looking for a guard who can make plays for others and get his own shot at will.
Okay, cool. So getting into some of his strengths here, what makes him a unique, potential prospect here for the Rockets. One of the things that you hear about a lot in reading about this kid and kind of watching him, the thing that pops most is his passing. Do you think that's his best skill right out of the gate?
That's 100% probably his most elite skill that he has. Is this guy is, probably a tier below elite playmaker. He can make every pass in the book. He really can. He can move defenders with his eyes. And honestly, he's able to leverage his incredible scoring ability to also make some incredible plays for his teammates that really makes the entire team better. Now we'll say, and we'll get this into, we'll get into his weaknesses later, but I can't give him an elite grade because he has a bit of careless and turnover issues. We'll get into that later, but all in all, as just a talent perspective, as a passing player, he's probably top 3 passers in this draft. I probably only put Dillon ahead of him.
Okay, interesting. Now, you mentioned from the efficiencies perspective, just to go over some of the numbers really quickly. So he averaged 15 points a game, 5.7 rebounds, and 4.7 assists. Now, he only shot 32% from behind the arc, but, and these stats are courtesy of Locked on NBA Big Board, our in-house draft expert, Rafael Barlow, apparently he shot 64% at the rim, 62% in the half court, and he added 5.1 free throws per game on 84% shooting. He had a 59% true shooting percentage. So when you talk about the efficiency, are you going based more so on like the outside shooting and that kind of shot profile, or were you just talking about the overall package?
I'm talking about the outside shooting and his efficiency numbers. Those look really good, especially at the rim. But when you look at the film, there's a mixed bag. He gets to the rim well. He has craft. He has crafty moves and step throughs, and he finishes well at the rim. But a lot of those windows are very bleak that he's making those shots. And there was a lot of layups that he left on the board, and that's really just due to the lack of athleticism Kasparas has. And so when you scale that up, I feel like he may have some issues later on finishing at the rim. But more importantly, when we get back to the efficiency, what I was talking about is he only shot about 32% from three. And this guy takes a heavy diet of threes, almost 5 to 6 threes a game. And a lot of the efficiency issues, I think, you can attribute that to is he take a lot of shots off the dribble. He has this elite step back package that I think is some of the best I've seen from a young prospect. I mean, he really creates space. He's able to sell the drive and leverage that in two step backs in a very efficient manner. And he creates good space on them. But I think it gets to a point where he's just doing too much, right? And they can sometimes be a bit too much into the offense. And he's not yet good enough a shooter to shoot them at a high enough clip, even though I think he's actually generating good looks for himself. So that's just one of those things where, young players, they have to work on that skill set even more and get better at that. But, when you compare him to some of the elite shooters in this draft, I think he can be an elite shooter, but he's just quite not there yet. And I think his finishing and package and getting to the rim was pretty okay. But I do think he got blocked a couple more times than I'd like to see.
Okay. Now, taking mention his passing as like his one truly kind of like, or his best skill, maybe not quite to the elite category yet, but just his best overall skill. He's got the blend, different ways that he can score up and down the floor. When you get into the territory, talking about a guy as a combo guard, right? I think the issue there is just, how effective do you think he'll be, or how effective was he playing off ball is the thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, his off-ball game didn't really pop as much. He'll relocate, and I think honestly, he'll relocate, and he has some cuts, and he's got some backdoors on film. But I just think his role in Illinois' offense was so heliocentric. Guys were really looking to get the ball and reverse it back to him. And even when he got catch and shoot open threes, let's say off a broken play or anything like that, I thought he shot it decent, but not well enough for a guy of his stature. So as an off-ball player, I think he has a future in that as a catch and shoot player, and we'll talk about some of his comps. I think he can definitely scale down, so there's a role for him there, but that's definitely wasn't his role at Illinois. And although he did flash some backdoor cuts and some movement without the ball, he's not by any chances a movement shooter in the ways that you would like to see from a guy his size with his pedigree.
So do you think he's going to be a lead guard at the next level? Is that like his ideal role?
I think he's going to be a combo guard, and projecting forward, I don't think he had the usage of a superstar, and I don't think he's quite good enough to be a superstar, even though but those things are still in question for him. Those things are still within the realm of his possibilities, just because he's such an elite passer. And as well as the way he plays with this very high motor. I think he's relentless at attacking, and he has that attacking mentality of a superstar. I just don't know if the skill is quite up to par just yet. And then when you scale that up to NBA level defenders, he has a good handle, but I don't know if the space that he's creating, especially going to the rack or getting to his mid-range, will be consistent enough to generate consistent offense, especially if his jump shot is at a 32% rate. So to me, he needs to show more as an elite shooter for me to really buy into him being a superstar. So right now, I think we'll talk about his role, but right now I think he more slots in as a six-man combo guard coming off the bench, electric scorer, and can make plays, and a secondary creator.
Coming up, we're going to talk about Jakucionis' weaknesses as well as his player comps, where we can expect him to potentially fit into this Rockets rotation, and more. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more. Use the code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon until midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. What's your go-to move after an epic game? Are you ordering wings and reliving the highlights? Imagine being rewarded with free food just because someone went off for 50. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day with a $20 or more order. Code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, you touched on a couple different, areas, maybe, reasons for some concern with Jakucionis in segment one, but kind of what is the biggest, I guess, maybe red flag or the biggest reservation you have on him as a prospect at this point?
Yeah, the biggest hands down weakness and red flag for Jakucionis, it's kind of crazy because his best probably skill is his passing we talked about, but turnovers is for sure the biggest red flag and biggest issue Kasparas has. Multiple games with over 5-6 turnovers in a game. And they probably could be attributed a little bit to just, I feel like, how big his role was. I think he had so much on his shoulders in the offense. And every Rockets fan can remember the meltdown Harden had in that Spurs game. And I think that kind of happened to Jakucionis, especially over the course of the season, as the minutes, as the burden of the offense,
the usage really caught up to him.
Yeah. So he can get lazy and a little overzealous with some of his passes that just, can cause some unforced turnovers. He can really struggle in those areas where his creativity just gets the best of him. And draft, people who look and evaluate draft prospects, we want to see that creativity, that fearlessness in a guy when they're passing, but he just kind of reached another level at that. And that's the type of thing that you just find, like, I'd like to see him get another year of college basketball under his belt where he could really just smooth those things out. I think him going into an NBA team right now, let's say if the Wizards or someone drafted him and he had to really have the ball in his hands in a high amount, I think he'd succeed to a certain degree, but the turnovers would really, hinder him and may really hurt him in the long run. I just think there's some refining of his skills that he needs that needs to be done.
Now, he doesn't strike me, right? He doesn't jump off the page as like, he's not an explosive athlete, right? He's not going to be, amazing in that department. And that's usually one of, I guess, the areas that you have to look at when you have a guy who isn't going to be, a top tier athlete, right? The skill and the craft has to be able to compensate for not being able to just be bigger, faster, stronger than everybody else that you're going up against. So how does that project, or how do you see that kind of projecting? How big of a dilemma is that going to be, him kind of overcoming maybe the athletic jump? Because college ball is a completely different beast than getting to the NBA, where everybody is bigger, stronger, faster than anybody else in the world.
And I think that's my biggest worry with Jakucionis. I mean, Jakucionis, he struggled to me to convert consistently, not create, but to convert consistently on the perimeter. And I think that'll only get worse in the NBA as the 3-point line is further, as defenders are better, faster, stronger, like you said, and have better length. And then I think what really worries me is his finishing at the rim is good. I think he's fearless. I think he's fearless going to the room, and he does have craft. He parries in these beautiful hesitation moves, or where he'll stop in the paint and pump fake and really sell the defender and then use a crafty step through move to get to the rim. And he's very smooth in his movements. I just think when the athleticism catches up to him, there were some very tight windows that Jakucionis was converting these layups on. And I just don't know if those things will continue to be fruitful for him at the next level.
Like those windows just might not even exist at the next level,
right.
basically.
I mean, exactly. And I think Jakucionis, to me, struck me as a player that is so fearless that he might try it anyway. And I think it will end up in a decent amount of block shots if he's given that big role. But if he's given more of a secondary off the bench type role, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll score like if he's not the primary focal point for defense, I think he'll find those creases in the flow of the game to really convert at a high level. I'm kind of speaking in the sense because to me, he played like a superstar on that team, right? He had that. But if that is going to be his role in the NBA, I worry as teams really dial down on what you're good at and try and take that away from you. But as a secondary option that can play off the ball and play off the bounce and really just get, mixed in reps, I think he can be successful. I think that's where his role, his median outcome will kind of settle. And in that instance, I think he has enough finishing at the rim to, get opportunistic buckets when the defense makes mistakes, right? And he's fearless enough to actually convert on those. And I think he uses his body well. He uses fakes well. I just don't know how much space he'll be able to consistently create on those plays.
We see that, often sometimes here in the NBA, right, where, guys who are, maybe they're in, a primary option role on one team, and then they get moved to another team, and they're suddenly they're in a secondary or tertiary scoring role or creator role offensively, and then suddenly they're flourishing, right, and vice versa. We've seen guys who are tertiary or secondary creators offensively who then become the primary because they get traded to like a bad team or something. And the one guy that jumps to the forefront of my mind when I think about this is actually Mikal Bridges, going from Phoenix being like the third option and then to the Nets where he was the number one option for like that brief little stint, and now he's back in New York where he's very clearly like the third or fourth option at times, after Brunson and Towns, and then like depending on how well OG Anunoby's playing. And so looking at Jakucionis, right, he makes me think like, obviously, like as a secondary creator, as a guy who you could theoretically, right, bring off the bench, kind of sixth man spark plug, run some offense, as a backup guard, kind of using some of that combo guard skill set. That's where I feel like he has a chance to be really special, as opposed to him trying to shoulder, the entire offensive burden for an entire 35-minute, 40+ minute game as the number one option. That's where you'd probably have some disappointment in him as a player.
Yes, exactly. And lastly, as we go through our weaknesses, I don't want to be remiss, but we do need to talk about the defense.
Okay.
And at his size and his limited athleticism, there is some issues that he might get picked on defensively. But like I said, I think that motor kind of translates on the defensive end. And once you take away as much usage as a guy like that had, you might unearth a better defender than we were able to see with a guy who had to do everything for a team. Once he gets that secondary, tertiary role, I think he plays with determination and good motor and good energy. He's a smart defender. I think he'll be good in position on time. I think he'll develop well in there. There is a bit of worry, laterally, but this is in the NBA, I think as long as you can do a good enough job to rotate and stay in front of your guy just enough to where the help defense can make up for your limitations, I think he'll be just fine. But I know that that's a big worry for people with Jakucionis is, will he hold up defensively? And I think he won't be a liability, but I don't think he's going to be some great plus either.
Is there, before we move on to kind of our player comps and how he could potentially fit in with the Rockets, is there a game or two potentially that you would recommend people go back and look at if they want to see maybe a game where he played really, really well, and then maybe a game where he really struggled, some of the downsides that you were talking about, like with the turnovers or the defense?
Let me think. So he really struggled. You can pick any of those, like his in the season games where he had, I think he had 5 or 6 turnovers in 3 straight games at the end of the season, where it really just got away from him,
Four straight games in the year, he had 6 turnovers.
Yeah,
it was against Iowa, then Maryland, then Xavier, then Kentucky. 6 turnovers in each of those games.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like it got really ugly for him at the end of the year, and I think that's what really tanked his draft stock, because he was being looked at as a top 5 prospect. But the turnovers had always been there throughout the year, but it just hit rock bottom towards the end. And to me, that's just immense burden that he had. And even with a guy who took so many shots, I feel like, and had this ultimate green light, he didn't eclipse 30 at all this year. Like not in one game he eclipsed 30. So when you say there's a ton of good like games where, you know, you can pick any game where he scored over 20 and, you know, watch that and you'll get the full Jakucionis package, honestly. And it is a package full of step back threes and, you know what I mean? Like really, you know, him trying to create until, and I felt like a lot of games he kind of shot himself into rhythm, or, you know what I mean? He kind of had so many bites at the apple that he eventually got himself into rhythm. And that's why I worry about his stature as a star moving forward. So that's where, you know, you could just pick any of those, you know. I say after the first 3 or 4 games in the year, he really started to come on, and he had like an 8 to 10 game stretch where he was playing really well. And I think his stock was at its highest. And I think you can find a lot of the value in those games.
Yeah, it looks like he really started to take off. He had his first 20-point performance against Little Rock, and then he basically scored 20 plus in, what was it, 5-6 straight games. But it was that kind of like 8-game stretches where it looked like things really took off, ending with a game against Indiana where he had 21 and 5 assists. And then he had a game where he only scored 3 points, only played 9 minutes as well. So I don't know if there was an injury.
And there's a lot of that like single digit scoring games in the mix of his stats. If you just go down, there's a lot of like mixed in single digit score. And it's just like a guy with that type of green light, that, you know what I mean? It was kind of weird to see him wane in and out like that. And if he wants to be a superstar, I think he's coming out too early.
Okay.
That's what I'd say.
All right. Well, coming up, we're going to get into our player comps as well as how he could fit on this Rockets team. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Right now, we're talking everything Kasparas Jakucionis. And so far, Madison, the read I'm getting from you on this guy is that he's probably, at least out of the gate, he's probably basically your prototypical kind of 6th-man combo guard, come off the bench, take some pressure off your primary scorers, run the offense for spurts during a game. And maybe if he's really hot, right, he's got it going, he can win you some games by himself, or maybe not necessarily by himself, right, but get you going, carry the offense, in a game or two, that kind of thing. Let's get to this is always my favorite part of learning more about these prospects and kind of what to potentially expect out of them. The comps, where we do the low end comp, the mid-tier comp, and then the high end outcome. So let's start on the bottom end of things. What are some of your low end comps for Kasparas?
Yeah, so one of my low ends is Jared Bayless. This is a blast for the 2000s pass, but people know Jared Bayless. Jared Bayless is a similar size combo guard. He came out as a lottery prospect with a lot of hype as a score first guard who could shoot, but never really lived up to the hype, but still added value as a, end of the bench player that can come in and make shots, basically. Another low end guy I have is Bones Highland, another combo guard who can handle some ball handling responsibilities, a little too undersized to really, take off. And the shooting just never really kind of came together to make a consistent impact. And I think that is some of the worry I have with him. So Bones Highland would probably be another one. And another one is Rudy Fernandez is, another low end outcome.
I like Rudy Fernandez too.
I liked him too. And that's like the better of the low end. But, Rudy could never really get on the floor because of his defensive acumen, and coaches didn't really trust him. But when he got on the floor, he made some crazy shots and really got guys excited. And people asking, why doesn't he play more? I can see that for Kasparas if the defense doesn't come around. But he's still really an electric, smooth scorer that you want to see more of. So that's why I chose Rudy. But yeah, so those are the 3 lows. Do you want me to move on to the medium?
Yeah, go ahead and let's go medium now, or mid tier.
Okay. So the median is where I really think he'll fall. So these are the prospects that I think he has the highest chance of actually meeting. Dante DiVincenzo So Dante DiVincenzo is if the shot really comes on, he has some great playmaking. He takes that off the ball game. Like Dante DiVincenzo is a decent off the ball player, but he's not really this pseudo ultra movement shooter, right? He takes the opportunities he has and he converts them at a high level, and can be a very high impact player that in certain segments of the season can really carry you, or certain series is when he has it going can really carry you. So I like that as a comp for him. Another one is Bojan Bogdanovic, which I think fits him very well as a combo guard who can handle, who can do some secondary creating, who can shoot the ball off the dribble and take advantage of the pick and roll, which is his highest play. He's excellent in the pick and roll due to his passing as well as his offense. This is the first name that you mentioned that is, I think, on par with him, like with the physicals too, because Bogdanovic is like right there at like 6'6", 6'7", and I think that when you're a combo guard, right, when you're stuck in that like tweener size, like 6'4", 6'5", like that's where you can get into some of the undersized worries or issues of not being big enough to truly guard up a little bit, or to use your size to take advantage of court vision, things like that offensively. So I like this comp just from the size perspective too, and Bogdanovic is a hell of a player. So he's a really good player, especially at Sacramento, and I'm talking about Sacramento Bojan Bogdanovic.
Okay,
so the next guy I would say, and these guys are more in the 6'4" range, 6'3", 6'4" range, but that's the kind of feel I got when I watched him play. But Malik Monk and Brandon Podziemski are another two median outcomes, I think, for him. Malik Monk has really turned into more than just a shooter. He's a playmaker now. He offers secondary creation and really helps Sacramento run their sets. And I think that's where he could, really, and I think defensively, that's where he can settle in as well. As like not this albatross defensively, but still serviceable. But it has such a great impact on offense. Not enough to become a superstar, but to still be effective, right?
Where you'll still win the minutes where he's on the floor.
Yes.
Like he's not, he gets you 20 on offense, but he's giving up 30 on defense. Like you don't want that, right? Like as long as you can be like passable on defense and good enough and still an impact player on offense, that's a win for him basically.
Yeah, exactly. And Pods, I like Pods a lot because I didn't mention this earlier.
No, we don't like Pods. We don't like Pods. Not since that series.
As a comp. As a comp. But I like Pods because as a comp for him, because Pods also was an excellent rebounder in college, and so is Jakucionis. Jakucionis was an excellent rebounder, and it goes for that motor. Smart player, great passer, and just the way Pods is able to be effective at times is just like the type of guy who can play off a star and really kill you as the release valve. I think that's also within, and they're such cerebral players. I think that's a good comps for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I like a lot of those mid-tier outcomes. Like if you're telling me that the Rockets could get any one of those players with this 10th overall pick, I think you'd walk away feeling like that's an absolute win at that point. Okay. What about the high? So like, pie in the sky, high end outcomes, Rockets take a swing on this guy at 10 and he like pans out in the best possible way. What you got?
Yeah. So the high end outcomes, I have Jamal Murray. I think that's an easy one. I think they're similar sized. They'll operate in them, as perimeter scorers who can shoot and really in the mid range. I think if those things really pop with him, Jamal Murray with more of a passing pop would really work for him, as well as Desmond Bane. I really like Desmond Bane as the comp, another comp for him as a guy who's just this electric shooter. And this is the shooting has to really pop if you notice these comps like it really. If that shooting really comes on in a real way, I think these guys are guys that his game could emulate very easily. Desmond Bane and Jamal Murray. And lastly, this is if the craft and the drive and the spacing that's allowed in the NBA really takes off. I think there's a little bit of Manu Ginobili into his game with the step throughs, with the hesitations, with the and some of the ways I really like how he gets some of his shots, just the craft and the overall tenacity. Like when I was saying motor, you remember the motor Ginobili used to play with, where he's just relentless.
Oh, dude, always going. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Going.
Like it's a motor that you see on offense with a guy who's just not like the craziest athlete, but you just see him relentlessly throwing his body everywhere. And I felt there was some motor in his offense to me. And so like that really reminded me, and some of the crafty step throughs that he had, and misdirections he used, going to the basket, and you combine that with the shooting. If the shooting really pops, you really might get a player like that out of Kasparas, and they have similar sizes. You know what I mean? They're more in that size tier, 6'6". So that's how I'm thinking. You know, but man, I don't know if those are very likely. I don't know if those are very likely.
I like that range of outcomes. And look, obviously with shooting being kind of the swing skill, and this is where, the fact that he is such a gifted, playmaker and has such a good feel for the game, his ability to pass and involve his teammates, that's the thing where like that skill is going to be bankable, period. And then obviously you got to figure out, okay, how does that skill stack up once you are dealing with NBA caliber defenders, right? The size, the speed, the athleticism, all that. But at the same time, I think one thing that has been so apparent in these playoffs for me specifically is guys, you can't exclusively just you need craft, you need skill to be able to succeed in the playoffs. Like watching Jalen Brunson go to work against, the Celtics, against the Orlando Magic defense, I apologize, not the Magic defense, the Pistons defense. There we go. Dealing with them now, dealing with the Pacers. Obviously, the Knicks are down right now, but Brunson is still going to work. Brunson's still getting his, and watching the ways in which he does it, right? Brunson is not a crazy explosive athlete. Now he's got a quick first step and he can get his shoulders past you, but he uses that strength. He uses tempo. He stops, he starts, he spins. The footwork is impressive. All those different things are what makes Brunson so elite on the floor. And that's why he's one of the NBA's best foul grifters, right? And so like things like that Kasparas already has in his game, TBD on how the athleticism actually translate and how much that maybe slows him down at the next level potentially. But if that shooting is real, right? If the shooting is at least in that 35, 36, 37% range from downtown, that's enough to keep a defense honest to where with then the craft and the handling and, getting your shoulders past the guy, that's where you can still, once he gets a defender on his hip, be able to create from that, from those opportunities. I like him, man. I think he's got to be like top 3 favorite prospect for me at pick 10.
Yeah, man. I think the Rockets should definitely pull the trigger if he's still there at pick 10. I know we'll get into why he'd be good pick for Rockets. Maybe I should just say it now.
Yeah, go for it.
But yeah. I mean, I think the Rockets really have players at every position right now, and so their biggest need, it has been their biggest need all season, and really reared its head in the playoffs, is creation. And this is one of the best creators in the draft, right? Just point blank. He may not always convert, right? But he is an elite creator. He's elite space creator on the perimeter, I'd say, right? And if once he gets into space, who knows, that craft might really pop in a real way when there's not 3 or 4 defenders barreling down on him. Once, defenses are not primarily focused on him. And the next thing is the Rockets need better and more effective passing. And that's something this guy's going to be able to do day one. That is the skill that he'll walk into the building and probably be the most talented on the team outside of Sengun, right? And we need that out of another guard. And I really like his handle. This guy's a smooth mover. He really navigates screens well. We play a lot of pick and roll. We play a lot of dribble handoff. And those are plays that will kind of create advantages that allow him to get downhill, or at least use the threat of getting downhill to get to his step back and make shots. A lot of the sets that we run from Jalen Green, I think he'll thrive tremendously in, but be a much better and effective passer out of those sets.
We that's one of the issues with kind of the way this roster has been constructed, right? Obviously, your primary ball handlers are Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green, and then essentially, Amen Thompson, is a guy that you hope to get more on-ball reps, with more frequency this upcoming season, and we saw that kind of grow exponentially this past season, right? Ime got to a point where he was really trusting Amen Thompson, and essentially that was your 3-man guard rotation between Fred, Jalen, and Amen as your primary ball handlers. Reed Shepherd still kind of waiting in the wings, see what he can become, next season, but I think it would be really beneficial for the Rockets to be able to add, like you said, another creator, because right now, Jalen Green is the only guy who can both self-create and create for teammates at a very high level from the perimeter. Yes. Fred can't really do it because Fred really doesn't have a ton of self-creation, right? Fred can run pick and roll and get into the offense that way, but Fred isn't the kind of guy who's going to be able to isolate and get to his own spots on the floor where he wants to. He does it in a pinch when he needs to, but it doesn't look great, right? And Fred doesn't have the same, ability to get downhill that Jalen Green has. So Kasparas would step in day one and not only potentially be, one of the best passers or second best to only Sengun on the team, but he would also immediately potentially be challenging, I guess, Jalen Green for the best, creator on the team, or at least best perimeter creator day one, which kind of, is a pretty damning indictment of where the Rockets are at as far as their self-creation ability.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think that's what the Rockets should not shy away from with this draft. If you were going to pick at 10, you're playing with house money, man. It's okay to take a swing on another creator that really help you and can develop in the background. I don't think Kasparas is quite ready to contribute on a winning team like the Rockets, but it wouldn't be hard. Like if this guy comes out and that shooting it pops. Well, I think if the shooting pops, the rest of his game is going to completely open up. You know what I mean? And I think MA is going to really identify some of the areas that he can really leverage his passing with and really bring that out of him. And I think you never know, man. Once you get into NBA spacing, right? That craft may just pop in a completely different way. There's a lot of buckets where it's just 2-3 guys around him, and he's really forcing it up there. And there's been a lot said about his athleticism or lack thereof, and that's really only in the jumping department. This guy has good size. He has good feet. I think his footwork is pretty good. And he has some real juice on a straight line, like, getting out of his, and I think that juice allows him to set guys up for that step backs so often. And so I think he can get to the basket on a straight line at an NBA level pace. You know what I mean? And so that a lot of that stuff matters a ton. And if he mixes in that mid-range game, combining that with the pick and roll of Sengun, I think they could be a really effective duo. And I think that's a gamble the Rockets should take at number 10.
You heard it here first. He's Jamal Murray, and Sengun is baby Jokic. So they're recreating the Denver Nuggets right here in Houston with this 10th overall pick. Now, all right, we want your thoughts on Kasparas Jakucionis. What do you feel about him as a prospect? Would you want to see the Rockets take him with that 10th overall pick? Give us your thoughts on him in the YouTube comments. Madison, you know the drill. Let me know where to track you down at.
You can find me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform you're choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.